Hello! I'm really excited to share this video. It's definitely different than my typical vlogs because it's not a vlog, but I was a guest on our PHP, which is Psychological Health and Performance at CU Athletics, on their podcast called The Power to Perform, and it's hosted by Allie, who you'll see in a minute, who is a clinical intern, and Janine, one of the assistant directors of PHP and one of the psychologists there, was also on the episode with me, and we talk about mental health and the importance of it in general and also specifically in athletics and for athletes. And I have a lot of close experiences with this and struggles. Like you've seen, if you haven't seen, I posted about my experience with mental health the past year on my Instagram. So if you want to read about that, you can see that on my Instagram. But I talked briefly about it and answered some common questions taking from my experiences, and it was definitely a really special episode to film. And in about a month, it'll be available on Apple Podcasts on the Power to Perform account. But they let me film the episode for my YouTube channel, so you guys get a little early access to it. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Power to Perform podcast. I'm your host, Allie Mallory, and I am the mental performance consultant and case manager here at Psychological Health and Performance at CU Boulder. And today we have a special episode, so we have two guests on here today, and I'll let the first one introduce herself, Dr. Janine D'Annibal. Hey Janine.
Hey Allie, thank you.
All right, Janine, tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do here at PHP.
Sure. So I am the assistant director at PHP, and I work with the athletes. I also do work with the teams, and I also supervise the trainees.
Amazing. And we are so lucky to have her. It's been wonderful to have you, since August?
Yeah.
That's when you started?
Yeah.
Feels like I've known you forever.
Forever.
And our second special guest, Miss Emma Pollock. Hey, Emma.
Hello.
Emma, tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do here at CU.
I'm a junior. I'm on the track and field team, and I'm a sprinter and hurdler.
Amazing. What are your specific races?
400 and 400 hurdles.
Good God, that sounds horrible.
Not as bad as you think it is, but
that's good. I'm glad you have that mindset. That's important. Where are you from?
I'm from Seattle, Washington.
Ooh, very different than CU or Colorado.
Yeah, definitely a lot rainier, but I love the sun, so it's perfect.
So that makes sense why you moved out here.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, let's get into our first pre-planned question. What has your experience been like as a student athlete here at CU?
I feel like it's definitely had its own ups and downs for sure. I'd say my first year here was probably one of the best years of my life. I was so happy. I was having so much fun. But then I've also last year was probably one of the hardest, if not the worst. And so it's definitely been a roller coaster. But I mean, I wouldn't change it for anything. I love being a student athlete, and I think it's a really special experience, and it comes with a lot of privileges, but also a lot of struggles as well that I think a lot of people don't really necessarily realize.
Yeah. What are some of those struggles you'd say?
I'd say definitely balancing your schedule with having adjusting to college life as a freshman was difficult, and then having a pretty regimented schedule, but I was pretty used to that from doing high school sports, but it's a little bit more demanding for sure, and just adjusting to living on your own, meeting new people. I didn't know anyone when I came to CU, and so trying to find my own people here and build my own support system was really important, and so trying to do that while also trying to focus on adjusting to a new training program, then new coaches and new teammates. And so that was definitely really tough, but also just expectations, not only from coaches, but also that you put on yourself, and obviously wanting to come in and perform the way coaches expect you to and the way you expect yourself to can amount to a lot of pressure. And also just adjustments in general are really difficult.
Yeah. And I'm sure, Janine, you've probably seen that a lot when we're working with student athletes.
Yeah, as I'm listening to Emma talk, it's like the word adjustments and transitions, and which of course can come with stress, right? But the other thing that it can come with that people don't think about as much is losses, because when you're adjusting to something, it means that you lost something else, right? So not only is it stress, but there can be some sadness and grief for what you're adjusting from. So I think that's constantly what you're having to adjust to, right, as a student athlete.
Like definitely like the first month of my freshman year, I was super homesick. And like I had only been to Colorado once during COVID to like look at the school on my own, and that was it. And so I didn't know I wanted to come out of state until I saw CU, and I ultimately decided to come here. And so being homesick was really difficult to cope with while also adjusting to so many new things. And so coming to PHP like definitely helped with that. And that was like the initial reason why I came, was to adjust to being homesick. And obviously over time that gets a lot easier once you build like a network of friends and like create your own family here. So that made it really easy. But also just, I feel like there's kind of like a misconception a little bit, because people always think like, oh, you're a student athlete, like it's such a privilege, and like it is, and like everything you get is like so nice. But people just think, oh, like you get all this stuff, you get all that. Like, they just kind of see like, I don't know, just like the perks. From the outside looking in, they just see like all the perks of it, but they don't really recognize like, well, we're a student athlete, but we're also a college student too. Like everything you're doing, we're doing. But then it's also like having a full-time job, but it's also like physically draining as well as mentally draining. And we have to travel, and like all the shiny things are definitely nice, but it's a little bit of a different reality when you're in it, and it's not quite as glamorous all the time like people think it is.
Yeah. And like, I know you kind of touched on coming into PHP, but what are other ways you've been able to take care of like your mental health, or that mental side of being a student athlete?
I feel like actually a lot of techniques that I've learned have come from PHP. And like some of it was just like my freshman year, I was really struggling with just like pouring everything into track and school, and like not taking enough time for myself, because I was just like always on like go mode, trying to figure out like what I had to do for classes, what to do for practice. And my therapist at the time like told me just like take like a 2-minute break, or just like watch a YouTube video, or like just take a small break, no matter how long or short it is, every day for yourself. And so like for me, I started with like watching one YouTube video a day, and like that was like 10 to 15 minutes of just like not thinking about anything else, just watching that, or just like watching a show. And I feel like that's like evolved over time into like reading and just like hanging out with friends, or like stuff like that, or going on for a walk. And so learning to take time for myself every day, and not just be like, just kind of like take a step back and realize it's not all about that, like school and track. Like I have a life also, and prioritizing that is really important. And I think just like making time for like my friends. Like I don't live with athletes, I live with friends I met freshman year, and that's helped so much. Like I get to go home and just like completely be away from track and my sport, and get a break from teammates and coaches. And I don't have to talk about track if I don't want to with them. Like sure, they know everything going on, but like I don't have to talk about that with them. Like they know me for more than just my sport. And so it's really nice to have that break and just be able to hang out with friends that are kind of like disconnected from the athletics world, which is really nice. And so I found that that's been really important as well.
Absolutely. Janine, what would you add to those things?
Yeah, I think as I hear Emma talk, I think about the word balance. It's how you bring yourself into balance, right? Because you're right, it would be super easy to get absorbed in your sport, be super easy to get absorbed in school, vacillate between the two, and you're trying like, wait a minute, even outside of these things, I like to do certain things. I like to hang out with different people. and like building those in. You know what I love what you said is like you've increased that over time. Like it maybe started out with the YouTube video, but now like you learned more of how to stay in balance. You've increased your repertoire, so to speak. Yeah.
I feel like it definitely like took a lot of practice and like adjusting. And like I also learned freshman year, like another technique was thinking of like my life in like buckets, like family and then school and track and like maybe things I like to enjoy, like friends, and thinking about like where on a particular day, like where my values lie and like how much time am I pouring into what I value most that day. Like if it's family that day, like did I call them or am I like caught up doing homework? Like maybe I need to take a break and give them a call and see how they're doing. And so really like putting an emphasis on where my values are and how much time I'm actually giving to each value has helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's like kind of recognizing you're not just an athlete, like you have different parts of your identity and being able to fill up those other buckets. And something you were talking about earlier about just how what you struggled with coming into college as a student athlete. Janine, what do you see working here at PHP? Some of those like main presenting concerns when people come in. What do people come in with, I guess?
Boy, variety of things. Certainly anxiety, depression, relationship problems with partners, with coaches, with teammates, with family members, the whole gamut of relationships, eating concerns, substance use, sometimes even more traumatically stressful events. So a little bit of everything. But I would say the leading presenting issues are anxiety, depression, and relationship stuff.
Yeah. And that makes sense too if you're thinking about the population that we're seeing here. And I'm sure too, working in athletics, there's probably like that stigma, right? And obviously there's still the stigma to this day. It's getting better, I would say, around mental health. But have you ever noticed that here as a student athlete or just being an athlete in general, like the stigma around mental health?
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like the view of like you just have to push through it. Like it doesn't matter. Like that's not the focus. Like just push through whatever problems you're having. Like you have to be strong, like keep going, and just kind of ignoring it and not addressing it and like being told that like it's okay to sit with those feelings and to have those feelings and to like figure them out is kind of just like push to the side, compartmentalize, and just push through. And I feel like that's what a lot of athletes try to do, and it just makes things like so much more difficult because you can't perform physically without like a good mental headspace. Like that's such a huge part of it. And like I feel like obviously like your mental headspace makes up who you are as a person, and you can't have the athlete without the person. And so
you're not a robot.
Yeah, like that's like a huge thing. And so I think placing an emphasis on your headspace is just like such a big deal, because how can you perform if you're not able to focus? And that comes from headspace.
Absolutely. And that's really well said too. Janine, what would you add to that?
Two things, Allie. One, for stigma, I think it's getting a little better. However, what I still see is like there might be like maybe counseling, coming for counseling or mental performance work is getting a little bit better, but use of like medications, psychotropic medications, there's still some kind of stigma and concern about that. Although, frankly, in my experience, it's sometimes less about from the athletes themselves and more from like parents or family members about that. So we still have some work to do with that, because short-term use of medication can really, really help anxiety and depression. And I love what Emma said, because the whole idea, too, is yes, to feel well and also to be able to perform your sport at a high level. And, that ignoring is not a strategy,
No, it is not.
Yeah. But some misconceptions, though, too. It's not really stigma. It's kind of a misconception is that, at PHP, we're just coming in and trying to like cheer you up or, just make you feel happy. To me, I don't see it as it's about helping athletes feel happy. I would say it's how to find balance, how to cope with different stressors, how to work on your headspace, like to be able to perform. So I think that's somewhat of a misconception about what we do in here sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's really well said too. Because therapy's not easy, right? It's challenging. I'm sure you've seen that too. And it's like you're just like you put in all the practice physically for your sport. It's like therapy's the same way, but on the mental side. Like you're practicing, you're putting in the work to get better mentally.
Yeah, like I can't even, like last year when I was going through like my depression and really bad anxiety, like I can't even explain like how hard coming to therapy was. Like it was difficult just to like go because I knew how difficult it was going to be and just like how exhausting it is to like have to like unpack everything. But I knew that I wasn't going to get any better if I didn't do it. And there was like so many sessions where I would just like cry the whole time or leave crying. And like obviously that is really difficult, but I mean, I'd rather do it in a safe space than trying to do it on my own because obviously I wasn't at PHP every day. It was just like once a week. So I did have to like cope with things on my own, and doing it in a safe space with someone there to like help guide it was so much easier, even though no matter how hard it was to work through it all, it was definitely a lot easier at times.
Yeah. Well, and just look at how far you've come, right? And it's like being able to put in the work and talking through it with a professional and just seeing the results is probably really nice and satisfying.
Yeah, definitely.
So what advice would you give someone struggling with their mental health?
Definitely reach out. Like, I know that it can be really hard, and I didn't necessarily do it. Like, I started seeing PHP when I was a freshman, so I've been coming here once a week like for the past 3 years. So I was already doing those things, like preventative things, because I knew I struggled with anxiety. But when it came down to it last year, when I was really low, like I was not reaching out for help, and people would ask how I was, and I would just say I was fine because I was putting them first and didn't want to worry anyone. And so it wasn't that I was ashamed, I just didn't want anyone to worry. And so I was like, I don't want to like bother them or put that burden on them and tell them what is actually going on. And so, but it's a lot more of a burden. And if you don't reach out and something were to happen, I'm lucky that that didn't end up happening for me. But if something did go wrong, like that's a lot more of a bad outcome than if you had just bothered to tell someone. Like, you're not a burden to anyone, and everyone is willing to help you no matter who you reach out to. And so not being afraid to do that and just having at least like one person you can reach out to is definitely a big thing I took away. And like, no matter how hard it is to tell them, then it's best just to do it, because I was struggling about like January through July, and I didn't reach out and tell anyone until July. And if I had done it sooner, it would have been so much more helpful, and it would have helped a lot of things and gotten things moving forward a lot quicker than it ended up happening. But also just being transparent is a huge thing I've learned. And I was finally like transparent with one of my coaches back home, and he was like a huge role model for me, and he was the first person I talked to about everything that had happened. And after that, I told my family, and it made things a lot easier for me over the summer once I had finally done that, because then I felt like I had support. Like, I already had support from them, but it was a different kind of support now that they fully knew everything that was going on. And yeah, it was difficult for them to hear, and it made things a little bit difficult for them when I decided to come back to CU and not stay home. And it was hard for them to let me go and watch, just like stand back and see what I was going to do. But having that support and knowing that they know everything that goes on was so much easier. And then once I came back to CU, I was completely transparent with my coaches. And I think that was a huge thing, because I would just say I was fine. So they had no idea what was going on. And like, people could tell when I was having an off day, or maybe it was a bad day, but they didn't actually know what was going on. So when I was transparent with my coaches, they were like fully willing to help. And everyone is willing to help if you're transparent with them. And so I think doing that helped a lot. And it really like made a strong relationship with my coaches too, because then they understood me on a different level, and now they can cater to more like what I need, and they know what I've been through and how I've adjusted. And also it makes like improvements in training and PRs and stuff like that so much sweeter with them, because like they know where I was and what I went through and I battled and like where I am now. And so just being transparent with people is really big.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Emma. Janine, what would you add to that?
It's just inspiring, I think. It really is, Emma. It's really inspiring that you were, because that's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
So I guess the only thing I would add, because Emma said it so well, but obviously, PHP, we're confidential services. So if someone comes, we do not tell unless people sign a release. And then PHP can also be helpful if somebody is struggling about talking to a coach. That's something we could help with too. Emma didn't need that help, right? You felt okay. You kind of went direct, but sometimes that can be a little intimidating or overwhelming. I'm not sure how to say it or what are the right words. And that's something PHP can assist with too.
Such a great point. Yeah. And I think just with this podcast too, it's like trying to show people all the different ways that PHP can support. And so, Emma, I just really appreciate your vulnerability on this episode. I think it really will touch so many people who are listening of like, oh, wow, I'm not alone. Someone else has struggled. And I know you've like shared your story on different platforms. And so, and just how amazing that is. So seriously, thank you.
Yeah. After I shared it on Instagram, I wasn't really sure like what the response was going to be. And of course, it took a long time for me to be like able to share it. And once I did, like I just got so many like sweet messages and comments, but also a lot of like DMs of people being like, thank you so much for sharing your story. Like either they went through something similar or they're just like, thank you for like breaking down the stigma of this. And I thought it'd be perfect to come on the podcast because I didn't realize, because mental health, I feel like there's a lot more advocates for it now, especially in athletics, than before, like with Simone Biles and like so many like big athletes doing it.
Right.
That was like, well, if I share my story, like, will it really actually do anything? Because people that are bigger than me are already doing that. And I feel like me doing that made it more relatable in a sense, because it's like these are people on my Instagram that I'm friends with, or like I might know from like high school. And so sharing it made it more relatable, I think, to a lot of people to see like, okay, like this is happening with people that are just like me, or people that are in college athletics just like me. Like, it doesn't matter how big you are, like this is happening all over. And so sharing it was just like really special, and how I like didn't realize how many people it would actually help. And so
that's amazing. Well, thank you. And thank you both for being on this episode. And thank you everyone for listening.